Bernice Abbott is a famous photographer from the 1920s era. She was originally from Ohio and she moved to New York to look for a career. Eventually, she moved to Paris, and this is where her photography career started. She first worked for the famous photographer Man Ray, who needed an assistant. Bernice printed and worked in the darkroom. She realized she enjoyed photography and wanted to start her own. This photo is a picture of Bernice taken from Hank O'Neill in New York City in 1979. In 1925, Bernice set up her own photography studio. She focused on portrait photography. Here is a picture taken in 1920 of Coco Chanel by Bernice. Here is another example of Bernice's portrait from the 1920s of Charles Buddy Gilmore, who was an African-American night drummer. Bernice's most well-known portrait is of James Joyce. This portrait uses natural lighting from sky light. All three of these portraits are published in Paris Portraits 1925 to 1930. Bernice focused on lighting and angles in her portraits, and they are very modest photographs. In 1929, Bernice moved back to New York City. She was fascinated by the changes that have happened to the city. She wanted to capture the city before it changed, so she started taking photography of the different buildings in New York City. And according to the article, Types of Photography, Bernice captured more windows photographs because it was more about the world, and she wanted to capture the changes of the city. Here's an example of an explanatory and perspective photograph taken by Bernice. Bernice's explanatory black and white images are photographs of New York and New York City buildings to capture the original city before it began to change. These images were published in a book called Changing New York in 1935. The New Deal Federal Act for Unemployed Artists during the Depression sponsored Bernice's documentation of New York and its changes. 302 images were published. All of these images are very similar. Bernice uses natural lighting and black and white. You want to look at these images and you can see what was there before something was knocked down or something new was built. Bernice's Changing New York is used as a historical remembrance of the old New York before it was turned down and rebuilt. Because Bernice Abbott documented New York City in the 1920s to the 1930s, we are able to compare scenery then to the same scenery today in New York, just like in the image.